Hey guys, tonight we're taking a journey back in time to an era of emperors, legions, and some truly brutal entertainment, ancient Rome. But instead of focusing on grand architecture or military conquests, we're going to dive into the surprisingly grim, often horrifying, and intensely uncomfortable reality of being an ordinary Roman citizen attending the spectacles in the amphitheater. The horrifying reality of Roman arena spectators. Boring history for sleep. Forget your comfy couch and your high-definition screen. Imagine being crammed shoulder to shoulder with tens of thousands of sweaty strangers. The smell of blood thick in the air, knowing that your entertainment for the day involves watching people and animals die violently, sounds like a tough gig. Right! Being a Roman arena spectator was indeed a central part of Roman life. But here's the cheeky reality check if you were one. You probably wouldn't come out of it smelling like roses, or even feeling like roses after a day of sensory assault, psychological trauma, and potentially getting splattered. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, let me know where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your journey into the horrifying reality of a Roman arena spectator begins with the most immediate and pervasive discomfort, extreme crowding discomfort, disease, panic risk. Forget personal space and clear walkways in the colossal amphitheater. You were packed in like sardines, shoulder to shoulder, knee to knee with tens of thousands of other eager and not so eager citizens, making every breath a shared experience and every movement a challenge. Imagine the sheer press of bodies all around you, the inability to extend your arms, and the feeling of claustrophobia as the vast stands filled to overflowing. This was the omnipresent reality of extreme crowding. Amphitheaters like the Colosseum were designed to hold immense numbers of people, sometimes tens of thousands, all funneled through relatively narrow entrances and seated in tightly packed rows. There were no assigned seats for most, just general admission to a section, meaning the early bird often got a slightly less crushed worm. You were not just a spectator, you were a single molecule in a vast, undulating sea of humanity, constantly jostled and squeezed. It's like being at a modern-day rock concert, but it lasts all day. There are no emergency exits you can easily reach, and the mosh pit is everywhere. This dense packing led to immediate discomfort. You'd be sweating, squashed against strangers, unable to shift position easily for hours on end. The person next to you might be loudly chewing garlic, or simply reeking of the day's grime. Your bladder would be screaming for relief. But navigating out of the packed stands for a quick break, if such a thing even existed, which it barely did, was a Herculean task, meaning most just endured. Imagine the aching back from being hunched over, the stiff neck from trying to crane for a better view, and the feeling of your personal bubble being not just popped, but completely annihilated by the sheer press of bodies, beyond mere discomfort. Disease was a very real threat, with tens of thousands of people crammed together for hours. In an age before proper sanitation and understanding of germ theory, the amphitheater was a giant petri dish. Coughs, sneezes, and shared air meant that infections could spread like wildfire. Imagine the lingering stench of unwashed bodies. Remember that general lack of hygiene in ancient Rome, the occasional cough that sprayed droplets into the air, and the silent, invisible spread of ailments like colds, influenza, or worse. Among the tightly packed throng, it's enough to make you wish for a simple life as a solitary shepherd, or perhaps just a very effective medieval hand sanitizer. And then, there was the terrifying potential for panic risk. A sudden loud noise, an unexpected commotion, or a mistaken alarm could send a wave of terror through the packed crowd, leading to a stampede. Exiting the amphitheater was a slow, controlled process designed for order. But panic could easily turn it into a deadly crush. particularly for those in the lower, most tightly packed rows. Imagine a sudden ripple of fear, the desperate surge forward, and the horrifying sensation of being lifted off your feet, powerless to control your own movement, amidst a screaming, pushing mass of bodies. This pervasive extreme crowding highlights the sheer scale of Roman public spectacles and the practical discomforts and dangers endured by ordinary spectators, demonstrating that even attending the greatest show on earth came with significant physical and health costs, making the fun of the games often intertwined with acute misery. One mainstream historical fact that powerfully illustrates this crowding is the architectural design of Roman amphitheaters. Like the Colosseum's complex system of vomitoria, entrance-exit passages, designed for rapid ingress and egress, which, despite their sophistication, were still managing immense, tightly packed human flows, underscoring the sheer numbers of spectators in a confined space. A particularly quirky or fringe tidbit is that some Roman spectators, particularly those trying to secure prime viewing spots in the popular and most crowded lower sections, would reportedly arrive hours before dawn, often sleeping overnight outside the gates, enduring even more discomfort just to gain a slight advantage in the initial rush for seats. Imagine camping out all night for a good spot to watch people die. It certainly highlights their dedication or desperation for entertainment. Historians still argue whether the extreme crowding in Roman amphitheaters primarily contributed to a sense of communal euphoria and shared experience, enhancing the spectacle's psychological impact, or if it more often led to heightened aggression, physical discomfort, and the accelerated spread of disease, making the experience inherently unpleasant despite the excitement of the games. Did it make the experience better, or just more terrible regardless? Your Roman arena experience began with extreme crowding, leading to profound discomfort, constant disease, and ever-present panic risk. So, your Roman arena experience began with extreme crowding, leading to profound discomfort, constant disease, and ever-present panic risk. But even if you managed to navigate the throngs without succumbing to claustrophobia or catching the plague, another relentless torment awaited you once you were seated in intense heat sun exposure. Dehydration, fainting, forget climate control and shaded VIP boxes for everyone, in the vast, open-air amphitheater. You were often baking under the merciless Mediterranean sun for hours on end, making every moment a battle against the elements and your own rapidly depleting bodily fluids. Imagine the relentless glare of the sun beating down on your unprotected head, the sweat trickling down your back, and the dizzying sensation of lightheadedness as the hours dragged on. This was the omnipresent reality of intense heat. Roman spectacles typically took place during the day, often starting in the morning and lasting until late afternoon. The amphitheaters, with their open central arenas and tiered seating, offered little natural shade, especially for the common spectators in the higher, cheaper seats. You were not just a spectator, you were a sun-baked raisin in waiting, slowly dehydrating under the relentless Roman sky. It's like being at a modern-day outdoor festival, but it's 100 degrees Fahrenheit. There are no water stations, and you're stuck in your seat for 8 hours. The most obvious impact was direct sun exposure. Your skin would redden, then burn, and your head would throb from the unshielded rays. While some wealthier Romans might have parasols or hired attendants to hold shades, the vast majority of the crowd had no such luxury. Imagine the persistent squinting to try and see the action. Remember the constant crowding making it hard to see, the stinging sensation on your skin, and the dull ache that began to settle behind your eyes from the sheer intensity of the light and heat. This prolonged exposure, combined with the physical exertion of navigating the crowds and the sheer length of the games, led inevitably to dehydration. Water was not readily available, or if it was, it would be expensive and difficult to access in the packed stands. Most Romans simply brought their own meager provisions, which would quickly run out or become warm and unappetizing. Imagine the parched throat, the desperate craving for a cool drink, and the feeling of your mouth becoming dry and sticky. As your body slowly lost its vital fluids, it's enough to make you wish for a simple life working in a cool, dark cellar, or perhaps just a very reliable medieval water bottle delivery service. In severe cases, and for the weaker or older spectators, this combination of heat and dehydration could lead to fainting, the sudden blackout, the dizzying fall into the laps of your equally uncomfortable neighbors, and the brief, disorienting moment of regaining consciousness in a sea of indifferent faces, while attendants might eventually carry you out. It was a common enough occurrence to be simply part of the spectacle's background noise. Another casualty of the fun. Imagine trying to keep your wits about you, fighting the urge to black out, knowing that falling unconscious in such a dense crowd could lead to further injury or worse. This relentless, intense heat highlights the profound physical discomfort and very real health dangers faced by Roman arena spectators, demonstrating that the pursuit of violent entertainment came at a significant personal cost. Turning a day at the games into a punishing endurance test against the elements. One mainstream historical fact that powerfully illustrates this problem is the historical accounts of the velarium, a retractable awning being deployed over some amphitheaters like the Colosseum on particularly hot days, primarily for the benefit of the emperor and the elite in the lower tiers, implicitly confirming the significant problem of sun exposure for the rest of the vast, unsheltered crowd. A particularly quirky or fringe tidbit is that some Roman spectators, in an attempt to alleviate the intense heat, would reportedly bring small, personal sponges soaked in perfumed water, which they would periodically dab on their faces or behind their ears. Not necessarily to cool down effectively, but more to provide a temporary sensory distraction from the oppressive warmth and the general stench of the crowd. A little callback to future section. Imagine dabbing a rose-scented sponge on your forehead while watching a lion tear someone apart. It certainly highlights their desperate attempts at comfort amidst the chaos. Historians still argue whether the provision of limited amenities like the velarium by emperors primarily aimed to genuinely improve spectator comfort and enjoyment, thus ensuring popular support for the games, or if it was largely a symbolic gesture of imperial benevolence. With the vast majority of the common populace still enduring extreme discomfort, did it make the games more enjoyable? Or just project an image of care regardless? Your Roman arena experience was a relentless battle against intense heat, enduring constant sun exposure, debilitating dehydration, and the ever-present threat of fainting. So, your Roman arena experience was a relentless battle against intense heat, enduring constant sun exposure, debilitating dehydration, and the ever-present threat of fainting. But even if you managed to stay conscious and hydrated under the baking sun, another, far more pervasive and stomach-churning assault awaited your senses' overpowering odors. Blood, excrement, body odor. Forget fresh air and pleasant aromas. In the Roman amphitheater, your nostrils were assaulted by a horrifying cocktail of stench, making every breath a grim reminder of the brutal realities unfolding around you. Imagine the metallic tang of fresh blood coppery in the air, the pungent reek of animal waste and human bodily fluids, and the stifling combined scent of tens of thousands of unwashed bodies baking in the sun. This was the omnipresent reality of overpowering odors. The arena floor, the animal pens, the drains, and even the very air itself would be saturated with a ghastly symphony of putrid smells. There was no escaping it. Your nose was held captive by the unfiltered reality of mass violence and primitive sanitation. You were not just a spectator, you were an unwilling participant in an olfactory nightmare, constantly breathing in the foul effluvium of death and bodily functions. It's like being at a modern-day slaughterhouse combined with an open sewer. But it's your Saturday afternoon entertainment. The most potent and unsettling smell was undoubtedly blood. From the gladiatorial combats to the animal hunts and public executions, more on those later, the arena floor was perpetually soaked in it. Fresh blood has a distinct, coppery, metallic scent that would quickly become overwhelming, particularly on hot days when it would begin to congeal and decompose. Imagine that sharp, cloying smell, mingling with the dust and sweat, a constant reminder of the horrific violence unfolding before your eyes, a scent that would cling to your clothes and memory long after you left the arena, equally repulsive, and perhaps even more pervasive, was the smell of excrement. Wild animals brought into the arena, remember, those beasts from future sections would undoubtedly relieve themselves, and their waste would mingle with the sand and blood. Moreover, the sheer number of people remember that extreme crowding from Section 1 with limited access to latrines meant that human waste, both solid and liquid, was an inevitable part of the ground layer, particularly in areas less frequented or near the very bottom. Imagine the pungent ammonia sting in your nostrils, the foul, earthy reek of manure and human waste, a constant undertone to the metallic tang of blood, creating a truly sickening tableau for your nose. And let's not forget the collective body odor, tens of thousands of unwashed. Sweaty Romans remember that intense heat from Section 2, crammed together for hours in direct sunlight, would generate a formidable olfactory wall. Personal hygiene in ancient Rome, while not entirely absent, was certainly not on par with modern standards, especially for the common populace who might not bathe daily. Imagine the stifling, musky aroma of unwashed skin, stale sweat, and old clothing, all trapped within the vast bowl of the amphitheater, creating an overwhelming, inescapable human funk that blended sickeningly with the other. More visceral smells. It's enough to make you wish for a simple life as a solitary lighthouse keeper, or perhaps just a very powerful medieval air freshener. This overwhelming assault of overpowering odors highlights the truly visceral and unsanitized nature of Roman arena spectacles, demonstrating that the experience was not merely visual, but a full sensory immersion in the brutal realities of life and death, turning a day of entertainment into a grueling test of one's stomach and olfactory endurance. One mainstream historical fact that powerfully illustrates these conditions is the ancient Roman practice of spreading scented powders or even spraying perfumed water known as sparsiones or aspergillum over the crowd in amphitheaters during intervals. Explicitly designed to combat the pervasive foul smells, a clear indication of the severe odor problem at these events. A particularly quirky or fringe tidbit is that some Roman arena attendees, particularly those sensitive to smells, would reportedly bring small, fragrant pouches filled with dried herbs like lavender or mint, or even a piece of strongly scented ambergris, which they would surreptitiously hold to their noses during particularly gruesome moments. A kind of primitive smelling salts to counteract the stench. Imagine trying to block out the smell of death with a little sachet of potpourri. It certainly highlights their desperate attempts at mitigating the sensory assault. Historians still argue whether the presence of such overpowering odors primarily served as a raw, unfiltered reminder of the spectacle's brutality, thus enhancing its psychological impact on the crowd, or if it was simply an unavoidable byproduct of hosting large-scale events in an age without modern sanitation. Diminishing the overall spectator experience, did it make the show more impactful? Or just more disgusting regardless? Your Roman arena experience was a horrifying assault on your nose, choked by overpowering odors of blood, excrement, and pervasive body odor. So, your Roman arena experience was a horrifying assault on your nose, choked by overpowering odors of blood, excrement, and pervasive body odor. But beyond the sickening smells, the true main event was a relentless barrage of explicit brutality that few modern minds could truly fathom. Graphic violence, gore, death, desensitization. Forget choreographed fights and special effects in the Roman amphitheater. The violence was sickeningly real, unvarnished, and designed to shock, enthrall, and ultimately, profoundly alter your perception of human suffering. Imagine the sickening thud of a gladius hitting flesh, the desperate screams of a dying man, or the sight of internal organs spilling onto the sand. This was the omnipresent reality of graphic violence. Every combat, every hunt, Every execution was a performance of death, raw and unfiltered. There were no cutaways, no censor boards, no age restrictions in the modern sense. You were expected to witness it all, to revel in it, or at least to endure it. You were not just a spectator, you were an unwilling accomplice to a theater of cruelty. Your psyche slowly being reshaped by the constant exposure to ultimate human suffering. It's like being at a modern-day professional wrestling match, but everyone is really trying to kill each other, and you're in the front row. The sheer gore was unavoidable. Blood was everywhere, soaking into the sand, staining the armor of the victors, and sometimes splattering into the lower tiers of the audience, a delightful bonus for those who paid more. Apparently, limbs were severed, bodies disemboweled, and heads were sometimes separated from shoulders. Imagine the metallic gleam of fresh blood. Remember that smell from Section 3 on the Golden Sand? The grisly sight of a body convulsing in its death throes, and the visceral reaction of your stomach churning, fighting the urge to vomit, even as your eyes were morbidly drawn back to the spectacle. And then there was the undeniable reality of death. This wasn't pretend, it was final, absolute, and often agonizing. Gladiators fought to the death. Criminals were executed in brutal and imaginative ways, and animals were slaughtered by the hundreds. Imagine the hushed anticipation as a gladiator lay wounded, the roar of the crowd demanding the coup de grace, and the chilling finality of the blade striking home, extinguishing a life before your very eyes. This casual witnessing of death, repeated hundreds of times over a single day's games, could not but leave a mark. This relentless exposure to brutality inevitably led to a grim phenomenon desensitization. Over time, the shock would lessen, the horror might morph into indifference, and the casual acceptance of extreme violence would take root. What was once horrifying might become merely commonplace. Part of the entertainment. Imagine the first time you flinched, then the 10th time you merely observed, and then the 100th time you cheered for the finishing blow. Your own humanity subtly eroded by the sheer volume of suffering you consumed. It's enough to make you wish for a simple life as a gentle philosopher, or perhaps just a very strong medieval antidepressant. This pervasive graphic violence highlights the profound moral and psychological implications of Roman arena spectacles, demonstrating how society normalized and even celebrated extreme brutality, leaving an indelible mark on the collective psyche of its citizens, fundamentally altering their perception of suffering and the value of human life. One mainstream historical fact that powerfully illustrates this desensitization is the accounts from Roman authors like Seneca, who, despite criticizing the extreme cruelty of the games, described the crowds becoming increasingly bloodthirsty and demanding more gruesome spectacles, indicating a societal appetite for escalating violence and a diminishing sensitivity to suffering. A particularly quirky or fringe tidbit is that some Roman spectators, particularly those who were well-versed in gladiatorial combat and perhaps a little too desensitized, would reportedly bet on the precise manner of a gladiator's death, or the specific number of blows it would take, turning the agonizing final moments into a grim form of intricate gambling. Imagine placing a wager on whether a man would die from a throat cut or a gut wound. It certainly highlights the morbid depths of their desensitization. Historians still argue whether the constant exposure to graphic violence in Roman arenas primarily served as a tool for social control, instilling obedience and a disregard for life among the populace, or if it functioned as a cathartic release for societal tensions, allowing citizens to witness brutality in a controlled environment, thus preventing violence in daily life. Did it make them more brutal or less regardless? Your Roman arena experience was a relentless onslaught of graphic violence, saturating you with gore, normalizing death, and profoundly influencing your desensitization. So, your Roman arena experience was a relentless onslaught of graphic violence, saturating you with gore, normalizing death, and profoundly influencing your desensitization. But beyond the human-on-human or human-on-humanish brutality, a different, even more primal, terror was a constant feature of the games, adding an unpredictable element of chaos and genuine danger from beast escapes. Splatter, unpredictability. Forget safely caged zoo animals and predictable circuses in the Roman arena. Wild creatures were a volatile, terrifying component of the spectacle, making your spectator experience a visceral dance with raw, untamed fury. Imagine the sudden, terrifying roar of a lion, the frantic thrashing of a wild boar, or the horrifying moment a panicked animal surged towards the stands, sending a ripple of genuine fear through the packed crowd. This was the omnipresent reality of danger from beasts. The venations, or animal hunts, were a common feature of the games, involving exotic and ferocious animals brought from across the Roman Empire. These creatures, often starved, terrified, and disoriented, were inherently unpredictable, making every moment of their appearance a potential liability for the audience. You were not just a spectator, you were a potential snack, constantly aware that the flimsy barriers between you and a raging beast were all that stood between you and a very messy end. It's like being at a modern-day rodeo, but the bulls are actual lions, and sometimes they jump the fence. The most terrifying prospect was escapes, while great care was taken to secure the animals. Accidents happened. A particularly strong or desperate beast could breach a barrier, leap a low wall, or simply be unleashed in a moment of chaos, sending it hurtling towards the terrified spectators. Imagine the sudden gasp from the crowd, the frantic scramble in the lower rows, and the chilling realization that a ravenous lion or a charging bull was now loose in the stands. Its primal terror turning into a furious, indiscriminate attack. These were rare, but terrifyingly real. Occurrences, even without a full escape. There was the constant risk of splatter, as animals were killed whether by gladiators, venatores hunters, or other animals their blood. Entrails, and even bone fragments could be flung into the lower tiers of the audience by the force of the blows or the animal's death throes. Imagine a particularly violent swing of a spear, a sudden burst of blood and gore, and the sickening realization that something warm and wet had just landed on your face or clothing. Remember those overpowering odors from Section 3 now mixed with actual matter? It was a grisly souvenir, a physical reminder of the brutal reality of the arena, and a chilling thought that the line between spectator and participant was far thinner than you might wish. The fundamental unpredictability of wild animals added another layer of nerve-wracking tension. Unlike human combatants who followed certain rules, however brutal, a terrified beast could do anything. It might charge, cower, or suddenly turn on its handler, adding a chaotic element that kept the spectators on edge. Imagine the collective gasp as a seemingly subdued animal suddenly lunged, or the roar of excitement and perhaps genuine fear as a creature defied expectations, making every animal segment a terrifying gamble. It's enough to make you wish for a simple life-watching chariot races, or perhaps just a very sturdy medieval hazmat suit. This constant danger from beasts highlights the inherent wildness and uncontrolled chaos that was deliberately injected into Roman arena spectacles, demonstrating that the pursuit of visceral entertainment came with genuine, tangible risks for the audience, blurring the lines between a safe viewing experience and a life-threatening encounter. One mainstream historical fact that powerfully illustrates this danger is the historical accounts by Roman authors, such as Pliny the Elder, who describes specific instances of animals escaping into the seating areas of amphitheaters, causing panic and injury, confirming these were not just hypothetical fears but actual occurrences at games. A particularly quirky or fringe tidbit is that some Roman arena architects, in a seemingly bizarre design choice or perhaps a very dark joke, would reportedly incorporate small, shallow moats or ditches known as Euripii directly in front of the lowest seating tiers in some early arenas, specifically designed to catch or slow down escaped animals, allowing for a few extra seconds of warning before a charging lion reached the emperor's box. Imagine a tiny water hazard designed to save the VIPs from being mauled, It certainly highlights their awareness of the inherent risks. Historians still argue whether the inclusion of wild animal hunts in Roman games primarily served to demonstrate Rome's dominion over nature and its vast empire. Showcasing exotic beasts, or if it was simply another form of violent spectacle designed to cater to an increasingly bloodthirsty public's desire for novel and unpredictable forms of entertainment? Did it show imperial power, or just a taste for blood? Regardless, your Roman arena experience was fraught with danger from beasts, with the constant threat of escapes, unsettling splatter, and terrifying unpredictability. So, your Roman arena experience was fraught with danger from beasts, with the constant threat of escapes, unsettling splatter, and terrifying unpredictability. But beyond the gladiatorial clashes and wild animal hunts, arguably the most chilling and ethically disturbing aspect of the arena spectacles was the widespread display of state-sanctioned death, public executions brutality, moral compromise. Forget humane legal processes and private punishments in the Roman amphitheater. The death penalty was a theatrical event, designed to entertain, warn, and reinforce imperial power, making you an unwilling witness to institutionalized cruelty. Imagine the condemned trembling in the center of the arena, the collective roar of the crowd demanding their demise, and the agonizing, drawn-out methods of killing used to ensure maximum spectacle. This was the omnipresent reality of public executions. These were not swift, merciful acts. They were often elaborately staged, cruel performances sometimes called noxi, designed to be a deterrent, a warning, and a form of entertainment for the masses. Criminals, prisoners of war, and later, early Christians, were subjected to gruesome and humiliating deaths. You were not just a spectator, you were a complicit observer in a public act of dehumanization. Your moral compass subtly twisted by the normalization of such barbarity. It's like being at a modern-day live-streamed torture session. But it's sanctioned by the government, and everyone around you is cheering. The sheer brutality of these executions was truly horrifying. Methods varied, but they were often designed to be slow, agonizing, and visually impactful. Condemned individuals might be crucified, hung to slowly suffocate or die of exhaustion, devoured by beast damnatio et bestias, stripped naked and thrown to hungry lions. Bears or leopards, remember those dangers from beasts in Section 5. A particularly gruesome and popular form of execution. Burned alive, often tied to a stake and set alight, forced into mock mythological scenes where they would be genuinely killed recreating a myth. Like being torn apart by a bull reenacting the myth of Dirce. Imagine the desperate pleas turning to guttural screams, the sickening crunch of bones, or the smell of burning flesh mingling with the other arena odors. Remember those overpowering odors from Section 3. The purpose was not just death, but spectacular death, intended to terrify and amuse in equal measure. Witnessing such regular and extreme brutality inevitably led to a profound moral compromise. For the average Roman citizen, these executions were part of the fabric of society, a normal form of entertainment. Over time, the line between justice and sadistic spectacle blurred. You might find yourself cheering for the death of someone you didn't know, simply because it was part of the show, or because everyone else was. The casual acceptance of immense suffering and the objectification of human life would slowly erode your innate empathy. Imagine trying to reconcile the image of a man being torn apart by a lion with your own sense of humanity. Eventually just shrugging it off as what they deserved, or just entertainment. It's enough to make you wish for a simple life-making pottery, or perhaps just a very effective medieval ethical review board. This prevalence of public executions highlights the dark underbelly of Roman society and its entertainment, demonstrating how state power and popular demand converged to create a culture where immense suffering was not just tolerated, but celebrated as a means of social control and morbid amusement. Leaving a profound and unsettling legacy on the moral landscape of the empire, one mainstream historical fact that powerfully illustrates this practice is the numerous Roman historical texts and archaeological findings that detail the elaborate nature of damnatio ad bestias and other forms of public execution within the amphitheaters, explicitly describing their role as punitive spectacles and warning against lawlessness. Particularly for crimes against the state, a particularly quirky or fringe tidbit is that some Roman executioners or arena organizers would reportedly dress the condemned in specific costumes, or paint their bodies to resemble mythological figures or hated enemies, turning their agonizing deaths into a perverse form of live theater or political caricature, further dehumanizing the victims for the crowd's amusement. Imagine dressing a man as Prometheus, only to have him slowly disemboweled by a trained eagle. It certainly highlights the depths of their depraved creativity. Historians still argue whether the public executions in Roman arenas primarily served a crucial role in maintaining social order by instilling fear and demonstrating imperial authority, acting as a necessary deterrent, or if they were largely a reflection of a deeply ingrained cultural sadism. Catering to a populace increasingly desensitized to violence and demanding ever more extreme forms of entertainment. Did it uphold law or just unleash cruelty? Regardless, your Roman arena experience forced you to witness public executions, exposing you to extreme brutality and prompting a profound moral compromise. So, your Roman arena experience forced you to witness public executions, exposing you to extreme brutality and prompting a profound moral compromise. But the horrifying spectacles weren't the only force at play within the amphitheater. The sheer density of the crowd, combined with the intense emotions of the games, created a powerful, often uncontrollable, psychological phenomenon: mob mentality hysteria. Violence, loss of self, forget individual thought and reasoned judgment within the roaring Colosseum. You were swept up in a collective surge of emotion, making your actions and reactions dictated by the primal instincts of the overwhelming throng. Imagine the deafening roar of tens of thousands of voices rising as one, the contagious swell of anger or bloodlust spreading like wildfire, and the terrifying feeling of being completely absorbed by the will of the crowd. Your own identity dissolving into the collective. This was the omnipresent reality of mob mentality in the confined, highly stimulating environment of the amphitheater. With its sensory overload, we'll get to that later. The immense number of people remember extreme crowding from Section 1 created a potent psychological crucible. Individual inhibitions melted away, replaced by the amplified emotions of the group. You were not just a spectator, you were a single nerve ending in a vast, unpredictable, and often dangerous collective organism. It's like being at a modern-day sports riot, but it's a daily occurrence. And the stakes are life and death. This collective energy could easily escalate into hysteria. A sudden dramatic moment, a gladiator's desperate plea, a particularly gruesome kill, or an unexpected turn in a fight could send a ripple of intense emotion through the crowd that quickly swelled into an overwhelming wave. Cheers could turn to screams, gasps to frantic shouts, and excitement to uncontrolled frenzy. Imagine the contagious surge of bloodthirsty cries demanding a missile release or a ugula kill for a downed gladiator. Your own voice joining the chorus almost unconsciously, swept up in the passionate roar of the masses. The emotions of the crowd were so potent that they could even influence the decisions of the presiding magistrate or the emperor himself. This collective hysteria often directly translated into overt violence, while most of it was directed at the spectacles in the arena. The mob mentality could easily spill over into the stands. Fights could break out among rival factions supporting different gladiators. Arguments over seating could escalate, or frustrated individuals might turn on those perceived as weaker. Imagine a sudden brawl erupting near you, bodies flailing, shouts of anger filling the air, and the terrifying knowledge that you could easily become an accidental victim in a wave of undirected aggression. Simply for being in the wrong place at the wrong time. It's enough to make you wish for a simple life in a quiet library, or perhaps just a very reliable medieval crowd control unit. Perhaps most unsettling was the profound loss of self. In the midst of the roaring, surging crowd, your individual identity and moral compass could become secondary to the collective will. You might find yourself cheering for acts you would normally abhor, or participating in shouts and gestures that felt alien to your ordinary self, all because the powerful current of the mob swept you along. The anonymity of the crowd provided a perverse freedom, stripping away personal responsibility and allowing primal instincts to dominate. This pervasive mob mentality highlights the raw, psychological power of Roman arena spectacles, demonstrating how the unique environment of the amphitheater could transform individual citizens into a formidable and often terrifying collective entity, profoundly influencing behavior and morality through shared, amplified emotion. One mainstream historical fact that powerfully illustrates this phenomenon is the documented instances of riots and violent clashes among Roman factions associated with different chariot racing teams, which occasionally spilled over into the amphitheaters during other games, confirming the existence of intense partisan passions and a readiness for collective violence among the populace. A particularly quirky or fringe tidbit is that some Roman crowd members, particularly those who were deeply absorbed by the mob's energy, would reportedly unconsciously mimic the expressions and gestures of those around them, sometimes even developing temporary tics or vocalizations identical to their neighbors. As their individual identities dissolved into the collective consciousness of the arena, imagine finding yourself unconsciously adopting the exact sneer of the man next to you as a gladiator falls. It certainly highlights the powerful, almost hypnotic, effect of the crowd. Historians still argue whether the fostering of mob mentality at Roman games primarily served to unify the diverse Roman populace under a shared imperial spectacle, creating a sense of collective identity, or if it instead acted as a dangerous breeding ground for unthinking aggression and social instability. Capable of turning on the authorities if dissatisfaction arose, did it unite them, or make them more dangerous regardless? Your Roman arena experience was deeply shaped by the powerful mob mentality, risking hysteria, witnessing violence, and experiencing a disturbing loss of self. So, your Roman arena experience was deeply shaped by the powerful mob mentality, risking hysteria, witnessing violence, and experiencing a disturbing loss of self. But even if you managed to keep your wits about you amidst the roaring crowds, another, more subtle, yet equally frustrating, reality of large gatherings in ancient Rome was the constant threat to your personal belongings. Petty crime pickpockets, scams, personal loss. Forget secure lockers and watchful security guards. In the chaotic throng of the amphitheater, your meager possessions were prime targets for opportunistic criminals, making vigilance another exhausting burden on your already sensory overloaded day. Imagine the sudden, fleeting brush against your tunic, the uneasy feeling that your coin purse felt lighter, or the realization, too late, that the tempting offer was nothing but a clever trick. This was the omnipresent reality of petty crime, wherever large numbers of people gathered in ancient Rome markets, festivals, and especially the arena criminals followed. The dense crowds remember that extreme crowding from Section 1 provided perfect cover, and the distraction of the spectacles remember that graphic violence from Section 4 diverted your attention, making you an easy mark. You were not just a spectator, you were a walking target, constantly needing to be aware of the unseen hands that might relieve you of your hard-earned denarii. It's like being at a modern-day tourist trap, but the attraction is death, and the souvenirs are your stolen valuables. The most common threat was pickpockets. Skilled hands could deftly slip into your toga folds or belt pouches, relieving you of coins, small amulets, or any other valuable trinkets you might have carried. Their speed and subtlety meant you often wouldn't realize what had happened until much later. Perhaps when you reached for a coin to buy a snack if you could even get one. Imagine the fleeting sensation of a hand brushing your side, the casual demeanor of the person quickly melting into the crowd. and the sinking feeling in your stomach when you discovered your purse was gone, along with your hopes of a warm meal after the games. Beyond direct theft, you were also vulnerable to various scams. Opportunistic con artists might try to sell you fake souvenirs, offer guaranteed bets on gladiator outcomes, which, of course, were rigged, or even distract you with a staged commotion while an accomplice relieved you of your belongings. Imagine being drawn into a heated argument between two seemingly innocent bystanders, only to find yourself missing a valuable ring when the commotion suddenly dissipated, leaving you bewildered and poorer. It's enough to make you wish for a simple life in a quiet village, or perhaps just a very reliable medieval anti-scam hotline. The consequence of these acts was often significant personal loss. For the average Roman, even a small sum of money could represent a day's wages, or the cost of a few meals. Losing it meant real hardship, perhaps going hungry, or being unable to afford basic necessities. It was a tangible setback, adding financial stress to an already physically and emotionally taxing experience. Imagine making your way home, exhausted and empty-handed, knowing that your entertainment for the day had cost you far more than just your time. A bitter end to a supposed day of fun. This pervasive problem of petty crime highlights the underlying social realities of urban Roman life, demonstrating that even amidst grand spectacles and imperial power, the everyday struggles of ordinary citizens included constant vigilance against opportunistic criminals. Turning leisure into another arena of potential loss and frustration, one mainstream historical fact that powerfully illustrates this problem is the numerous references in Roman legal texts and satirical literature, like the works of Martial or Juvenal, to the prevalence of pickpocketing, con artists, and theft in public spaces and large gatherings, explicitly mentioning the arena as a prime location for such activities. A particularly quirky or fringe tidbit is that some Roman spectators, particularly those who were well aware of the pickpocket threat, would reportedly sew small, secret pockets inside the lining of their tunics or cloaks, or even hide coins in their mouth. Believing these hidden spots were impervious to even the most skilled thieves? Imagine trying to subtly spit a coin into your hand to pay for something. It certainly highlights their desperate and often ingenious attempts to protect their meager wealth. Historians still argue whether the prevalence of petty crime at Roman spectacles primarily reflected a widespread societal disregard for law and order, indicating a breakdown of public morality, or if it was an inevitable consequence of extreme social inequality and poverty in a rapidly expanding urban environment. Where desperate individuals resorted to theft for survival, did it show moral decay or just economic hardship regardless? Your Roman arena experience was constantly shadowed by petty crime, with the risk of pickpockets, deceptive scams, and unavoidable personal loss. So, your Roman arena experience was constantly shadowed by petty crime, with the risk of pickpockets, deceptive scams, and unavoidable personal loss. But even if you managed to guard your purse and survive the spectacles, the sheer length of the games, combined with the abysmal state of public amenities, presented another, more mundane but equally grinding, form of misery: lack of facilities, toilets, food, prolonged discomfort. Forget convenient restrooms and bustling concession stands in the Roman amphitheater. Basic human needs were largely an afterthought, making every long day a test of endurance against your own bodily functions and gnawing hunger. Imagine the desperate urge to relieve yourself, the pangs of hunger echoing in your empty stomach, and the ceaseless aches from hours of sitting rigidly on hard stone benches. This was the omnipresent reality of your lack of facilities. Roman amphitheaters. While engineering marvels for crowd control and spectacle, remember those vomitoria from Section 1, were remarkably lacking in what we would consider basic spectator comforts. The focus was on the show, not on the audience's convenience. You were not just a spectator, you were a captive audience. Your physical well-being secondary to the imperial display. It's like being at a modern-day marathon, but you're just watching from the sidelines for 10 hours. And there are no porta potties or snack vendors. The most pressing issue was the notorious absence of proper toilets. While there might have been a few rudimentary latrines at the very top or bottom tiers, or even just designated ditches, they were woefully inadequate for tens of thousands of people. Remember that extreme crowding from Section 1? This meant long, agonizing waits, or, for many, the uncomfortable choice of simply holding it, or, well, discreetly relieving oneself where one stood. Adding to the pervasive stench, remember those overpowering odors from Section 3. Imagine the bladder pain escalating hour by hour, the embarrassed squirming, and the grim decision to just go and hope no one noticed. A profoundly undignified aspect of your entertainment. Equally challenging was the scarcity of readily available food. While some vendors might roam the aisles selling a few basic items like bread, dried fruit, or cheap wine, the selection was meager, often overpriced, and incredibly difficult to access through the packed crowds. Most spectators brought their own packed lunches, which would inevitably become warm, stale, or run out quickly over a long day. Imagine the grumbling of your stomach, the wistful gaze at a piece of bread someone else was gnawing, and the feeling of dwindling energy as your body ran on fumes, all while watching strenuous combat. It's enough to make you wish for a simple life staying home and eating in comfort. Or perhaps just a very reliable medieval catering service. This combination of factors led to profound, prolonged discomfort, beyond hunger and bladder issues. The hard stone or wooden benches were unforgiving. Your back would ache, your legs would cramp, and your backside would grow numb. There was no leaning back, no stretching out, no real opportunity for relief for hours on end, all contributing to a grinding physical misery that was often overlooked amidst the excitement of the games. Imagine the constant shifting, the attempts to find a less painful position, and the feeling of your body slowly seizing up, making the walk home after the games an additional trial. This widespread lack of facilities highlights the low priority given to spectator comfort for the vast majority of Roman citizens attending the games, demonstrating that the experience was often a test of physical endurance and patience, turning a day of entertainment into a grueling ordeal where even basic human needs were a significant challenge. One mainstream historical fact that powerfully illustrates this oversight is the archaeological evidence from Roman amphitheaters showing relatively few and often very basic latrine areas compared to the immense capacity for spectators. Reinforcing literary accounts that suggest sanitation for the masses was a significant problem during public spectacles. A particularly quirky or fringe tidbit is that some Roman spectators, particularly the more resourceful ones, would reportedly bring small, designated relief jars with them to the games, discreetly using them under their cloaks to avoid the public humiliation and difficulty of seeking out a distant latrine, a sort of ancient, personal urinal. Imagine trying to subtly use a jar in a packed crowd without anyone noticing. It certainly highlights their desperate measures to cope with physiological needs. Historians still argue whether the limited facilities at Roman amphitheaters primarily reflected a pragmatic design choice, prioritizing spectator capacity and spectacle over comfort, or if it was also a subtle form of social control, reminding the common populace of their subordinate status through intentional discomfort. Contrasting with the elaborate amenities provided for the elite, did it show efficient design or social stratification? Regardless, your Roman arena experience involved a profound lack of facilities, struggling with inadequate toilets, scarce food, and grinding prolonged discomfort. So, your Roman arena experience involved a profound lack of facilities, struggling with inadequate toilets, scarce food, and grinding prolonged discomfort. But while discomfort was universal, how you experienced the games was largely dictated by your place in society. Particularly evident in the highly stratified seating arrangements, status segregation discomfort. Social pressure. Forget first come, first served, or even basic fairness. In the Roman amphitheater, your social standing dictated your physical comfort, your view, and your entire experience, making every section a rigid reminder of Rome's unforgiving hierarchy. Imagine being crammed into the highest, farthest rows, squinting to catch a glimpse of the action, while below you, the elite reclined in shaded comfort, enjoying perfect views. This was the omnipresent reality of status segregation. Roman society was obsessed with hierarchy, and the amphitheater was a powerful physical manifestation of this. Seating was strictly divided by class, gender, and even profession, a system enforced by ushers locari and architectural design. You were not just a spectator, you were a living embodiment of your place in Roman society, constantly reminded of your rank or lack thereof by the hard stone beneath you and the privileged few above. It's like being at a modern-day concert, but your ticket type dictates not just your section, but your very worth as a human being. The most desirable seats, offering the best views and closest proximity to the action and splatter. Remember that from Section 5 after were reserved for the elite senators, equities knights, and vestal virgins. These were often marble benches, sometimes with individual seats and even a degree of shade. Remember that intense heat from Section 2 from the Valerium. Below them, but still better off than you, were other distinguished citizens. But for the vast majority of the populace, you, the plebeian, were relegated to the upper tiers, the summa cavea. This often meant direct discomfort by design. Your seats were typically steep, narrow, and made of rough stone, offering little back support. The higher up you were, the worse the view, the less protection from the elements, and the more exposed you were to the full glare of the sun. Imagine craning your neck, battling vertigo, and squinting against the distant shimmering heat off the sand, knowing that a few feet below, someone of higher status was enjoying a leisurely view. The architecture itself was a tool of social control, literally putting you in your place. Beyond physical discomfort, this segregation exerted immense social pressure. You were acutely aware of your position, and the constant visual reminder of those above you could foster resentment, envy, or perhaps simply a resigned acceptance of the social order. Any attempt to sit in a higher, more privileged section would be met with swift and public humiliation. Imagine being pointed out by an usher, perhaps even physically removed, a public display of your lower status that would burn with shame. It's enough to make you wish for a simple life where everyone was equal. Or perhaps just a very effective medieval social mobility program. This pervasive status segregation highlights the rigid hierarchical nature of Roman society, demonstrating how even public entertainment served as a powerful tool for reinforcing social order and reminding every citizen of their designated place, making the experience for the common spectator a constant, sometimes humiliating, affirmation of their lower standing. One mainstream historical fact that powerfully illustrates this system is the specific seating regulations decreed by Emperor Augustus, meticulously detailed in literary sources like Suetonius and Cassius Dio, which formally codified the segregation of spectators by social rank within the amphitheaters, ensuring that every citizen's place in society was visibly reflected in their seating at the games. A particularly quirky or fringe tidbit is that some Roman citizens of aspiring but not elite status, wanting to appear more important than they were, would reportedly try to sneak into slightly better sections during moments of crowd distraction or bring their own small, portable cushions which were technically forbidden for the general public to imply a higher status, often leading to comical or humiliating confrontations with ushers. Imagine bringing your own personal, slightly too plush pillow to the arena to fake being rich. It certainly highlights the petty social climbing, even amidst the grandeur. Historians still argue whether the rigid status segregation in Roman amphitheaters primarily served a practical purpose by managing crowds and preventing disorder, or if its main function was ideological, a powerful and constant visual reinforcement of the Roman social hierarchy and imperial control, deeply embedding societal divisions into public life. Did it keep order, or just reinforce inequality regardless? Your Roman arena experience was deeply marked by status segregation, leading to profound discomfort and intense social pressure. So, Your Roman arena experience was deeply marked by status segregation, leading to profound discomfort and intense social pressure. But these grand spectacles were more than just entertainment or social stratification. They were carefully orchestrated instruments of power. Designed to shape your very understanding of the world and your place within it, propaganda overload imperial message. Forced loyalty. Forget nuanced political discourse and objective news in the Roman amphitheater. Every roar, every death, and every cheer was part of a meticulously crafted narrative, subtly yet powerfully impressing upon you the grandeur and invincibility of the Roman Empire and its rulers. Imagine the deafening chants for the emperor, the elaborate displays of exotic tribute from conquered lands, and the chilling lessons learned from the gruesome fates of those who defied Roman authority. This was the omnipresent reality of propaganda overload. The games were expensive, elaborate undertakings, funded by emperors and wealthy elites not purely out of generosity, but as a deliberate political tool. They were a powerful means of communicating imperial might, generosity, and justice directly to the masses. You were not just a spectator, you were a recipient of a multi-sensory, emotionally charged political sermon, constantly bombarded with messages reinforcing the dominant ideology. It's like being at a modern-day political rally, but it lasts all day, involves real lions, and your attendance is practically mandatory. Every aspect of the games reinforced an imperial message. The sheer scale of the amphitheater itself, remember, that extreme crowding from Section 1 spoke of Rome's engineering prowess and wealth. The exotic animals showcased Rome's dominion over distant lands. Symbolizing its vast empire, remember those beasts from Section 5. The display of criminals and enemies of the state being brutally punished served as a stark warning against rebellion or lawlessness. Remember public executions from Section 6. Even the distribution of free bread panem at Circenses, bread and circuses during the games, was a tangible demonstration of imperial benevolence. Linking the emperor directly to your well-being, imagine the banners proclaiming the emperor's victories, the parades of captured enemies, and the chilling realization that every spectacle, even a brutal death, was carefully designed to tell a story of Roman invincibility. This constant reinforcement was designed to cultivate forced loyalty by providing spectacular entertainment and basic provisions. The emperors aimed to secure the unwavering devotion of the populace. Your cheers for the games became, implicitly, cheers for the system that provided them. Your awe at Rome's power translated into a quiet submission to its authority. Imagine being swept up in a spontaneous chant for the emperor, feeling the collective energy of the crowd and experiencing a powerful, almost religious, surge of patriotism. Even if moments before you were complaining about your cramped seat or the terrible stench, it's enough to make you wish for a simple life away from political influence, or perhaps just a very effective medieval critical thinking workshop. This pervasive propaganda overload highlights the sophisticated manipulation of public spectacle by the Roman state, demonstrating how the amphitheater was not merely a venue for entertainment, but a powerful ideological arena where citizens were subtly, and sometimes brutally, indoctrinated into the values and authority of the Roman Empire, making their attendance a form of civic and political submission. One mainstream historical fact that powerfully illustrates this function is the explicit statements by Roman historians and poets, such as Juvenal, who coined the phrase panem et circenses, bread and circuses, describing how the emperors used these public provisions and spectacles to pacify and control the populace, diverting their attention from political dissent and securing their loyalty. A particularly quirky or fringe tidbit is that some Roman emperors, particularly those eager to solidify their popularity, would reportedly order specific types of animals or particularly famous or infamous condemned individuals to be featured in the games on their birthdays or special anniversaries, turning the arena events into personalized, large-scale birthday parties designed to cement their image in the public mind. Imagine getting a gladiator fight as your birthday present. It certainly highlights the deeply personal and political nature of these spectacles. Historians still argue whether the propaganda inherent in Roman arena games primarily succeeded in creating genuine popular support and long-term stability for the imperial regime by satisfying the masses, or if it merely offered a temporary distraction from underlying social and economic grievances, ultimately failing to prevent the empire's eventual decline. Did it truly unify the empire, or just delay its fall? Regardless, your Roman arena experience was a constant exposure to propaganda overload, delivering a potent imperial message and cultivating a powerful sense of forced loyalty. So, your Roman arena experience was a constant exposure to propaganda overload, delivering a potent imperial message and cultivating a powerful sense of forced loyalty. But even the most captivating and politically charged spectacle has its limits. And the sheer length of these Roman games often push those limits to the breaking point: prolonged duration boredom, fatigue, attention span. Forget quick sporting events and snappy intermissions. In the Roman amphitheater, a day at the games meant hours upon hours of entertainment, often with repetitive acts, making boredom and exhaustion as much a part of the experience as the thrill of the fight. Imagine the initial excitement slowly giving way to a dull ache, the fervent cheers tapering off into listless murmurs, and the desperate attempts to find new ways to occupy your mind as the sun relentlessly traversed the sky. This was the omnipresent reality of prolonged duration. Roman games were not short affairs. They often began in the morning and continued until late afternoon or even dusk, sometimes lasting for an entire day or even several consecutive days. With little variation in the format, you were expected to stay for the entire show, a captive audience for the emperor's largesse. You were not just a spectator, you were an endurance athlete of attention, constantly battling the encroaching tedium. It's like being forced to watch a 12-hour live stream of someone playing a video game. But the graphics are real, and you can't look at your phone. The inevitable consequence, for many, was outright boredom, while the gladiatorial combats were exciting. They often followed similar patterns. The Venetians' animal hunts could also become repetitive, especially if the animals were less aggressive or the hunters less skilled. The public executions, remember those from Section 6, might be shocking, but even horror has a diminishing return after multiple viewings. Imagine the moment when even the most gruesome death failed to elicit a gasp, or the long lulls between acts, where the most interesting thing was watching a stray dog wander onto the arena floor, making you wonder when the main event would really begin. This long duration also brought intense fatigue. Your body, already enduring extreme crowding. Remember that from Section 1. Intense heat, remember that from Section 2. And hard seating, remember status segregation, would simply begin to wear down. Mental exhaustion would set in from the constant sensory input and the effort of maintaining focus. Imagine the heavy eyelids, the desire to simply close your eyes and rest, and the nagging ache in every joint, making the entertainment feel less like a treat and more like a punishment. Particularly as the afternoon wore on and the sun, if no Valerium was present, continued to beat down. And then there was the sheer challenge to your attention span. In an age without fast-paced media, people's attention spans might have been different, but even a Roman citizen could only focus on raw violence for so long before their minds started to wander. Keeping thousands of people engaged for hours required a constant escalation of spectacle, a demand that arena organizers constantly struggled to meet. Imagine finding your thoughts drifting to mundane tasks, or fantasizing about your next meal, remember lack of facilities for food. As another pair of gladiators began their dance of death, the thrill replaced by a weary resignation. It's enough to make you wish for a simple life watching paint dry, or perhaps just a very effective medieval ADHD medication. This challenge of prolonged duration highlights a less discussed but pervasive aspect of Roman arena spectatorship, demonstrating that even the most sensational events could not entirely overcome the fundamental human limitations of endurance and attention. turning a day of imperial spectacle into a test of patience and a battle against profound boredom and fatigue for the average Roman. One mainstream historical fact that powerfully illustrates this duration is the historical accounts of Roman games, often describing entire days or even multiple days of continuous spectacles, with emperors like Titus and Trajan hosting games that lasted for over 100 days. A clear indication of the immense time commitment expected of spectators. A particularly quirky or fringe tidbit is that some Roman spectators, particularly those in the upper, cheaper seats who couldn't easily leave, remember lack of facilities and crowding, would reportedly bring small, rudimentary board games or knucklebones with them, secretly playing them under their tunics during the less exciting acts or during long intermissions. Using the noise of the crowd as cover, imagine subtly playing a game of dice while a minor criminal is being fed to a lion in the distant arena. It certainly highlights their desperate attempts to alleviate boredom. Historians still argue whether the prolonged duration of Roman arena games primarily served to demonstrate the immense wealth and generosity of the emperor, solidifying his public image through sheer quantity, or if it also gradually desensitized the populace to the point where only increasingly extreme and novel acts could capture their jaded attention, ultimately driving the escalation of violence in the arena. Did it show imperial power, or just cause jadedness regardless? Your Roman arena experience was a test of endurance due to its prolonged duration, leading to pervasive boredom, profound fatigue, and a strained attention span. So, your Roman arena experience was a test of endurance due to its prolonged duration, leading to pervasive boredom, profound fatigue, and a strained attention span. But beyond the discomforts and psychological tolls, your physical safety as a spectator was never truly guaranteed. The very environment of the amphitheater harbored a multitude of hidden perils, health risks, injury, falling debris, contagion. Forget safety regulations and emergency medical teams in the chaotic and often unsanitary Roman arena. Myriad dangers lurked beyond the spectacle itself, making your attendance a gamble with your own well-being. Imagine the sudden sharp pain of being struck by a flying object, the terrifying tumble down a steep flight of stairs, or the nagging cough that lingered after a day spent inhaling dust and shared air. This was the omnipresent reality of health risks, the construction of these massive arenas. While impressive, did not prioritize modern safety standards. Combined with the sheer number of people, remember extreme crowding from Section 1 and the nature of the spectacles. The amphitheater was a surprisingly hazardous environment. You were not just a spectator, you were a potential casualty, constantly exposed to unseen threats that could turn your day of entertainment into a trip to the Roman equivalent of an emergency room if you were lucky enough to find one. It's like being at a modern-day construction site during an earthquake, but it's a daily event, and everyone is too distracted by the show to notice your plight. One immediate threat was personal injury, beyond the risk of being crushed in a panic. Remember panic risk from Section 1. Slippery steps, uneven surfaces, or jostling crowds could easily lead to falls, sprains, or even broken bones. Imagine trying to navigate the steep, crowded stairwells to your seat, feeling a momentary slip, and desperately trying to regain your balance amidst a sea of pushing bodies. Knowing that a bad fall could leave you with a crippling injury in a place with no immediate medical attention. Equally dangerous was falling debris. The arena was a dynamic environment. Weapons could be flung, broken armor shards might fly from combatants, or even small stones or fragments of decorative elements could detach from the structure itself, especially in older or less well-maintained amphitheaters. Imagine a sudden shout, the blur of something heavy hurtling towards you from the arena below, or the unexpected shower of dust and small fragments as an overhead ornament chipped away, leaving you scrambling for cover. And let's not forget the occasional souvenir of blood and gore from the arena floor. Remember splatter from Section 5. And then there was the ever-present threat of contagion. The combination of extreme crowding, poor ventilation, and deplorable hygiene. Remember lack of hygiene from Section 5 created perfect conditions for the rapid spread of diseases. Respiratory illnesses like colds and flu were rampant, but more serious contagions could also be transmitted through close contact. Shared air and general unsanitary conditions. Imagine inhaling the stale, rebreathed air, feeling a sneeze from someone behind you, and the chilling thought that you might be bringing home more than just memories from the games, but a serious illness that could devastate your household. It's enough to make you wish for a simple life spent in isolation, or perhaps just a very effective medieval face mask. These widespread health risks highlight the often overlooked dangers of attending Roman public spectacles, demonstrating that the pursuit of entertainment could involve significant physical perils beyond the dramatic violence of the arena itself. Making the act of spectating a gamble with one's own health and safety in a pre-modern world, one mainstream historical fact that powerfully illustrates these health concerns is the archaeological evidence from Roman urban centers, including the discovery of mass graves consistent with plague outbreaks, and the literary accounts of epidemics that often swept through crowded populations, underscoring the constant threat of infectious disease in tightly packed public spaces like the amphitheaters. A particularly quirky or fringe tidbit is that some Roman spectators, particularly those in the cheaper, higher seats, remember status segregation, would reportedly bring small, personal cushions not just for comfort, as that was often forbidden, but also as a makeshift shield to protect their heads from accidental falling debris from above, often tucking them under their arm or using them to create a small, personal canopy. Imagine holding a pillow over your head to avoid being hit by a flying spear fragment. It certainly highlights their practical and sometimes humorous attempts at self-preservation. Historians still argue whether the numerous health risks faced by Roman arena spectators primarily served as an implicit reinforcement of imperial power, demonstrating that even their recreation was controlled and could be dangerous, or if they were merely an unavoidable consequence of building massive, complex structures for large crowds in an era lacking modern safety and health regulations. Did it show control, or just incompetence regardless? Your Roman arena experience was riddled with health risks, from potential injury and dangerous falling debris to the ever-present threat of contagion. So, your Roman arena experience was riddled with health risks, from potential injury and dangerous falling debris to the ever-present threat of contagion. But beyond the physical dangers and discomforts, the sheer overwhelming nature of the spectacles created a relentless assault on your senses, pushing your cognitive and emotional limits. Sensory overload noise, visual chaos, stress. Forget tranquil settings and quiet contemplation. In the Roman amphitheater, every sight, every sound, and every sensation was amplified to an extreme, making it a dizzying, disorienting, and ultimately exhausting experience for your mind. Imagine the deafening roar of 50,000 voices, the dizzying array of flashing colors and chaotic movement, and the relentless pounding headache that began to set in as your brain struggled to process the onslaught. This was the omnipresent reality of sensory overload. The amphitheater was a crucible of raw human emotion and spectacular action. Designed to overwhelm and enthrall, your senses were bombarded from every direction, leaving little room for quiet thought or calm observation. You were not just a spectator, you were a sensory sponge, absorbing every terrifying, exhilarating, and nauseating detail. Until your mind felt utterly saturated, it's like being at a modern-day rock concert inside a fireworks factory, while a car crash happens in front of you, and it lasts all day. The most immediate and pervasive element was the sheer noise. The roar of the crowd. Remember, mob mentality from Section 7 was constant, rising and falling with the action. Add to this the clang of steel on steel from gladiatorial combat, the trumpets and horns signaling new acts, the screams of the dying, the roars of the wild animals. Remember danger from beasts from Section 5, and the shouts of vendors. Imagine the ringing in your ears after hours of this cacophony, the inability to hear your own thoughts, and the constant, thrumming vibration of sound that permeated your entire being, leaving you feeling utterly drained and frayed. Visually, It was pure visual chaos. The arena floor was a constantly shifting tableau of violence. Blood remembered graphic violence and frantic movement. Above, the crowd itself was a swirling mass of bodies and colors, even if just drab tunics. Their sheer number was overwhelming. Sun glare. Remember intense heat from Section 2 off the sand or weapons. The dust kicked up by combatants, and the flickering light of torches for later evening events added to the disorienting effect. Imagine your eyes darting back and forth, trying to follow multiple fights, struggling to process the rapid succession of gruesome images. Your brain desperately attempting to make sense of the dizzying, often disturbing, spectacle unfolding before you. This constant assault on your senses inevitably led to profound stress. Your nervous system would be on high alert for hours, reacting to the perceived dangers and the sheer intensity of the environment. Adrenaline would surge, then dissipate, leaving you feeling exhausted and wired. The psychological toll of witnessing so much death and suffering, even if initially thrilling, would accumulate. Imagine the tightness in your chest, the rapid beating of your heart, and the pervasive sense of unease that settled over you. Even during moments of apparent calm, as your body and mind struggled to cope with the relentless overstimulation. It's enough to make you wish for a simple life in a quiet, dark room, or perhaps just a very effective medieval sensory deprivation chamber. This pervasive sensory overload highlights the extreme demands placed upon Roman arena spectators, demonstrating how the very design and nature of the spectacles were intended to overwhelm the senses, transforming a passive viewing experience into an intensely physical and psychological ordeal. Leaving spectators drained, disoriented, and emotionally fatigued. One mainstream historical fact that powerfully illustrates this overwhelming environment is the accounts from Roman authors describing not just the visual aspects of the games, but also the elaborate use of musical instruments, loud fanfare, and the controlled release of wild animal roars and human screams, all designed to heighten the sensory experience and emotional impact on the audience. A particularly quirky or fringe tidbit is that some Roman spectators, particularly those prone to migraines or sensory sensitivity, would reportedly bring small pieces of beeswax or wool to discreetly plug their ears during particularly loud or disturbing segments. A primitive form of earplugs to try and mitigate the overwhelming noise. Imagine trying to block out the screams of a man being eaten by a lion with a wad of beeswax. It certainly highlights their desperate attempts to find moments of respite in an overstimulating environment. Historians still argue whether the sensory overload experienced by Roman arena spectators primarily contributed to a heightened sense of collective ecstasy and shared participation, intensifying their enjoyment of the games, or if it more often led to psychological distress, physical discomfort, and a form of desensitization that dulled their emotional responses over time. Did it enhance pleasure or just cause numbness? Regardless, your Roman arena experience was a constant battle against sensory overload, barraged by relentless noise, disorienting visual chaos, and profound stress. So, your Roman arena experience was a constant battle against sensory overload, barraged by relentless noise, disorienting visual chaos, and profound stress. But all these individual horrors, the crowding, the heat, the smells, the violence, the dangers, the lack of basic amenities, the social pressures, the propaganda, the sheer length, and the sensory assault culminated in something far more insidious. A deep and pervasive moral decay cruelty. Apathy. Societal impact. Forget innate human compassion and a respect for life. In the Roman arena, the constant exposure to suffering, casually consumed as entertainment, gradually eroded the very fabric of empathy, leaving a chilling legacy on the individual soul and the wider society. Imagine the casual shrug as another life was extinguished, the detached fascination with inventive new ways to kill, or the unsettling realization that your own capacity for horror had slowly, imperceptibly, withered away. This was the omnipresent reality of moral decay, The amphitheater was not merely a place of spectacle. It was a powerful social machine that normalized brutality, desensitized its participants, and cultivated a chilling indifference to human suffering. You were not just a spectator, you were a silent contributor to a cultural shift, your very presence affirming and perpetuating a system that elevated violence to an art form. It's like being at a modern-day reality TV show where contestants are genuinely tortured, and your viewership counts as a vote for more. The most direct consequence was the cultivation of cruelty, by witnessing and cheering for acts of extreme violence. Spectators were implicitly encouraged to find pleasure in the suffering of others. The lines between justice, entertainment, and sadism blurred completely. This wasn't just about watching a fight, it was about watching people agonize, suffer, and die for your amusement. Imagine finding yourself intrigued by a particularly slow or painful demise, or cheering for the coup de grace with a fervor that would have once shocked you. Your own sensibilities becoming warped by the constant exposure to brutality? Hand in hand with cruelty was profound apathy, when death and suffering become commonplace. They lose their power to shock or evoke sympathy. The constant repetition of gore and agony, remember graphic violence from Section 4, eventually numbed the audience. The cries of the dying became mere background noise. The shattered bodies just props in a macabre play. Imagine a gladiator begging for mercy, and feeling nothing but a faint irritation that the fight was delaying the next act. Your emotions dulled to the point of indifference. This emotional detachment was perhaps the most frightening transformation. Stripping away the very essence of human compassion, the long-term societal impact was immense. This normalized cruelty and widespread apathy were not confined to the arena walls. They permeated Roman society, influencing attitudes towards slaves, prisoners, the poor, and eventually, even political rivals. If life was cheap in the arena, it could easily become cheap outside it. The games created a populace that was accustomed to, and perhaps even expected, violence as a solution or a form of control, contributing to a culture where brutal power was admired and suffering was dismissed. It's enough to make you wish for a simple life in a different civilization, or perhaps just a very effective medieval social worker program. This profound moral decay highlights the most terrifying and lasting legacy of Roman arena spectacles, demonstrating how the institutionalization of violence as public entertainment could fundamentally corrupt the human spirit, leading to a chilling desensitization and a widespread acceptance of cruelty that left an indelible, and often dark, stain on Roman civilization. One mainstream historical fact that powerfully illustrates this moral decay is the writings of Roman intellectuals and early Christian authors, such as Tertullian and Augustine, who vehemently condemned the gladiatorial games precisely because of their corrupting moral influence on the populace, arguing that the spectacles encouraged bloodlust and extinguished human empathy. A particularly quirky or fringe tidbit is that some Roman children, growing up constantly exposed to the arena, would reportedly play gladiator games in the streets, but with a disturbing emphasis on simulating the final. Gruesome death blows and the audience's demands for the coup de grace. Mirroring the adult spectacles in their morbid play, imagine children pretending to disembowel each other with sticks for fun. It certainly highlights how deeply the arena's values permeated even the youngest minds. Historians still argue whether the moral decay attributed to Roman arena games was a primary cause of Rome's eventual decline, by fostering a brutal and apathetic populace, or if it was merely a symptom of deeper societal issues, such as political instability, economic inequality, and a pre-existing cultural acceptance of violence that simply found its most elaborate expression in the amphitheater. Did it cause the fall? Or just reflect it regardless? Your Roman arena experience ultimately exposed you to profound moral decay, fostering a chilling cruelty, widespread apathy, and a lasting societal impact. Now, let the roar of the crowd fade, the stench of blood vanish, and the horrifying images of death recede from your mind. No more worrying about flying debris, no more fear of mob hysteria. and certainly no more agonizing over the moral implications of your entertainment. You can let go of the extreme discomfort, the constant dangers, and the profound psychological tolls of being a Roman arena spectator. Their thrilling yet undeniably brutal world was a testament to a different era, but their lives were undeniably horrifying. That loud, bloody, and often tragically unexamined ancient world belongs to history, not to your peaceful present. Drift now into a deep, untroubled rest. Sweet dreams. End of script. Sweet dreams.